You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the director of the John Smith Centre, Kezia Dugdale, and Conservative commentator Tim Montgomerie. But let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The Telegraph looks at the Duke of Cambridge's touching tribute to his late grandfather, Prince Philip, with the headline, "He would want us to get on with the job." Words apart. The Metro looks at Prince William and Prince Harry's very different and moving tributes to the Duke of Edinburgh. "We'll miss you, Grandpa." That's the headline in the Mirror. The Mail claims an exclusive with news that senior royals have agreed that one of them will always be at the Queen's side at future public engagements. The Financial Times leads with Boris Johnson ordering an investigation into David Cameron's private lobbying for finance company Greensill Capital. Cameron faces inquiry. The Guardian also looked at the PM's inquiry into his predecessor. While the Star leads with people braving the elements after lockdown with the headline, "We're living the dream, Dave." And Kezia Dugdale and Tim Montgomerie standing by to take us through the newspapers. Welcome to you both. Good evening. We're going to start with the Financial Times and the story that we've been running, our lead story, the investigation into David Cameron and his links with Greensill being launched today. Tim, you've had a look at this.
Yes, well, I kind of have mixed views about this, Gillian. I think, first of all, we have definitely a problem in this country of incredibly close links between big business and big government. And it's understandable in many reasons, because when you have government spending about half of national income during crises like we've just lived through, the decisions it takes on funding and regulation have amazingly big impact on business, and business obviously wants to ensure that those impacts are managed. So there's definitely something to fix and to be organised. Whether David Cameron and focusing the inquiry on him is fair, because in many ways he's only doing what everyone already does in the system that we have. So yes, good, we need a reform of the system, but I wonder if there's a little bit of some Brexiteers in government settling scores with David Cameron on the specific issue of how he's lobbied.
Kezia, do you think it's unfair to focus the investigation on an individual, on David Cameron?
No, and I would have to disagree a little bit with what Tim's just said. You know, he describes David Cameron as just doing what everybody else does. Well, not everybody else has the Chancellor's phone number or the Health Secretary's phone number ready in their phone. And that's the worry people have, is that a former Prime Minister might have extra power, extra contacts at their disposal that are used in a way that the public should know about in the interests of transparency and in decency, really. And that's why this is such a big story. It's become a bit of a running sore for David Cameron and indeed the UK government now for, I think, a good 40 days, broken first by the Financial Times, the Sunday Times coming in quickly to develop the story. Got a situation now, an unprecedented situation, where the Prime Minister is conducting an inquiry into one of his predecessors' actions. I don't think we've had that before. That's a detail in the Financial Times story. And we do need to get to the bottom of what's happening here. And we do need to talk about what Prime Ministers do when they retire from public office. What's an appropriate way for them to behave? What are the appropriate types of business relationships that they should have in the 21st century?
Is that the bigger issue, Tim, that there aren't clear guidelines as to what happens to Prime Ministers once they leave office, how they conduct themselves? You know, what are the lines that they shouldn't be crossing? It's not as distinct and clear as perhaps it is in the United States.
There are guidelines, and actually it's been well sort of reported that before he became Prime Minister, David Cameron himself said this all needed to be cleaned up. And he, for example, introduced a 2-year rule whereby you couldn't lobby after you left office for that period of time, to try and create a break between the power that you had and the influence you could possibly have later. Now, I think Gordon Brown today has said that limit should be 5 years, and perhaps Gordon Brown is right. But I don't think we can avoid that. The fundamental issue, though, is that if you do have government so impactful on business, and during the crisis for example, 10 years ago after the stock market crash. The amount of help government was giving to businesses just to survive, particularly in the financial sector, was enormous. And Alistair Darling the then Labour Chancellor, had to regularly talk to business to ensure business has its say in things that impact them. Often politicians are the best connected. They know how it works. So I think this is a lot more complicated than just seeing it as an issue of former politicians being greedy. It's about the nature of the kind of state we have in the United Kingdom.
And we'll await the findings of the inquiry that's been launched. Let's have a look at The Guardian, Kezia. Lots of people out shopping on the high streets. Is this what we need to boost the economy?
Well, we do need it, but I'm afraid at the moment it's only happening in England, and I think to a lesser degree in Wales. The shops are very firmly shut here in Scotland. The hairdressers are open again, though, and I know where I'm going on Friday morning. But yes, we do need a little bit of an economic stimulus, quite a significant one, actually, to make up for what ground we've lost over the past 12 months or so. You had an earlier report today showing that footfall in our high streets is twice what it was a week ago, but it's still markedly down on what it was a year ago. But shows you that there's still a long, long way to go until we get the economic recovery that we desperately, desperately need.
And what do you think the impact will be, Tim, of many people getting used to shopping online during the various lockdowns? Do you think that they might be reluctant to go back to the high street?
I think some people will, but I can't remember, Gillian, the exact percentage. I don't have it in front of me, but I think we saw Amazon's revenue or profits up by 50% over the last year, 50%. And I'm not a big fan of Amazon for partly the reason how they treat their warehouse workers. But I've been using Amazon. It is just so convenient. It's only been the way you've been able to get hold of goods. So the high street was already in trouble even before this crisis. And I think it's going to be hard for it to fully recover now because of this blow that it's suffered. People are now used to getting parcels delivered and finding ways of receiving those parcels even when they're not at home.
Yeah, indeed. Let's move to the Mirror and their front page. We'll miss you, Grandpa. And this, the tributes from the two princes, Kezia.
Yes, it's a lovely photo, isn't it? And two very respectful but very different contributions from the two princes talking about their grandfather's life. We know that Prince Harry is now returned to the United Kingdom from America. He's going into a period of isolation or quarantine ahead of the funeral on Saturday. He'll have to be tested before he's able to go to that. So we have had those statements and very heartfelt and very fond. Both of them speak of their grandfather, and it's a nice read and it's a beautiful picture.
Yes, I mean, there has been much made of the tone of the statements, and they've been quite different. But why wouldn't they be, Tim?
Yeah, they're different people. And I think Harry's first statement, I think on Saturday, was criticised, for example, by Andrew Pearce, who regularly appears on these paper slots as lacking the sort of warmth and humanity that he thought should have been paid to a grandpa. Whereas today, of course, Harry's statement is great. The legend of the barbecue, legend of banter, I forget exactly what he said, but it's a really heartfelt personal tribute from Harry. And I think we have to remember that whether we're talking about Harry or William or some other members of the royal family, this isn't just the public engagement thing that is for most of us. They've lost their grandfather, they've lost their father, they've lost someone who I think the public has underestimated how central he was to the royal family. And I think we're going to see probably quite a lot of judgment about how all of these royal characters are behaving this week. But it's a grieving family, and I think we should give them a bit of slack. And, yeah, hope on the margins that Harry and William perhaps have some time together, a little bit of time for very much needed reconciliation. But it is a funeral for a family, for a grandfather at the end of this week. And that is really what we should, I think, reflect on.
Yes, Kezia, that is the central issue. They are a family grieving. We are all part of that grief, and many people are passing comment, but we still have to respect that they are a private family.
Well, of course, and I can't say I'm looking forward to the weekend's newspaper coverage, where I think we'll see pages and pages of people poring over the details of body language and who was looking at who and who said what to who and all the rest of it in quite an unedifying way. This is going to be a small funeral because of COVID without question, but it will be broadcast to the nation, and it will be the central focus of what we talk about for many, many days to come. And you're right, at the end of the day, these are two still relatively young men who've lost their grandfather. And I think everybody across the country, regardless of their political views or what they think of the monarchy, can relate to that. It's about loss and grief, and everybody knows what that feels like.
And the Metro also talking about the difference in the two statements from the princes. Harry saying a legend of banter, and William saying a lifetime of service. But both statements showing the clear love and respect and sense of loss that both of them are feeling, Tim.
Absolutely, and I think it's the Mail front page. We may get to at 11:30. Talks about the commitment of all the royal family to sort of now ensure that the Queen isn't alone and public engagements. And I think that's what hopefully will unite the royal family at the moment. There are obviously some differences, not just a difference in the statements that have been issued, but all to do with the Harry and Meghan affair we've all been living through of late. But I think there is, in the royal family as there is in the country, huge respect for the Queen and a huge awareness that she does have this void in her life, as she's admitted. And all of her family, children and grandchildren, hoping to step forward to fill that void in the best way they can. That's the thing I think that they can best do.
And this, the politicians paying respects to Shirley Williams, who's died at the age of 90.
Yes, as you say, a really sad story tonight. 90 years old, Shirley Williams, a huge political figure for so many. I think she had 50 years of service across the two houses, the House of Commons and the House of Lords. First of all, for the Labour Party, she was a minister in Jim Callaghan's government, covering both the education brief and the science brief, and described here as a trailblazer in The Guardian because she was a very lonesome female face for a long time in politics. She later split from the Labour Party to join the SDP in the early 80s as part of the Gang of Four, and then became president of the Liberal Democrats and ended up leading the Liberal Democrats in the House of Lords later in her life. So a real stalwart of centrist politics, much loved by many across the political spectrum. And I saw earlier tonight a lovely picture on Twitter from Jo Swinson, the former leader of the Liberal Democrats, a picture of Shirley Williams holding Jo Swinson's son. So, she'll be a big loss to many people across the Liberal Democrats and beyond.
Yes, and Tim, many saying that she should have been the first female Prime Minister. I mean, she was that good.
Well, I'm a Conservative, so I was happy that Margaret Thatcher was the first Prime Minister. But on the subject of her sort of standing up for feminism, and one of your colleagues, Gillian, Sophie Ridge, really visited an anecdote that Shirley Williams shared with her. And in the early days of MPs being in Parliament, when I think there were just 29, she was one of them. And in the tightly packed division lobbies in the House of Commons, she talked about how she would get pinched, and her colleagues would get pinched in the bottom, in the legs, by men misbehaving. And all the women agreed to get together for the next time this happened. And they all wore stiletto heels. And they agreed that any time that they were pinched, they would ensure that they were stilettoed, these men. And one MP arrived in the Commons tea room the next day limping, and all the women gathered around him and said, "Oh, what's the matter? You look very hurt." And he said it was gout. But I think Shirley Williams and her colleagues had made a big statement on equality that night.
Yes, inflicted gout, yes, quite. Just time for this cartoon, Matt cartoon in the Telegraph, Kezia. Talk us through it.
Yeah, so this is a cute take on the Greenshill story that we covered earlier from the Financial Times about the degree to which David Cameron can get you what you want in government. So the joke here being, if you can't get your hairdresser on the end of the phone, give David Cameron a call and he'll sort it out for you instead. So very tongue-in-cheek from Matt here.
Yes, yeah, heavily tongue-in-cheek. Tim, did you manage to get to have a pint outside today?
No, but I sort of slightly Christmas Eve feeling for me tonight because I'm talking to you from Salisbury, but tomorrow I'm having lunch with 4 friends outside. I think it'll all be very socially distanced, etc. But just the idea of going out, meeting friends, doing things that we used to take for for granted has got me very excited. So
yeah, they're simple
tomorrow
pleasures.
will be my day.
Kezia and Tim, we shall see you in the next hour. Thank you very much.